You went to the grocery store. You bought the same things you always buy. Same brand of bread, same cooking oil, same packet of biscuits you've eaten since childhood. And when the total came up on the screen, something felt wrong. Not wrong like you miscounted. Wrong like you've been quietly robbed, and no one is willing to call it that. You paid, you left, and on the way home a thought crept in. One you don't say out loud because it sounds too simple, almost embarrassing. Why does everything just keep getting more expensive? Every year, without fail, like it's been scheduled. You've heard the word inflation. Economists say it on TV like it's perfectly normal, like a 6% rise in the cost of living is just the weather. But here's the thing nobody explains properly. Inflation isn't an accident, it isn't bad luck, and it isn't just about supply and demand the way your textbook told you. It is, in many ways, by design. Let's talk about that. In 2020, a 1 kilogram packet of atta, wheat flour, cost roughly 25 to 30 rupees in most Indian cities. By 2023, that same packet was pushing 40 to 50 rupees, a jump of nearly 60% in 3 years. Meanwhile, your salary, if you got a raise at all, probably went up 5 or 10%. Do the math on that. Sit with it for a second. That gap is not an anomaly. It has been happening for decades across every economy on Earth. In the US, $1 from 1971 has the purchasing power of about 7 cents today. 7 cents. What cost $1 50 years ago now costs nearly 15. This isn't a glitch in the system. It's the system working exactly as intended. And to understand why, we need to go back to something so fundamental, so invisibly woven into modern life that most people never question it. We need to talk about where money actually comes from. Here's the version they don't teach in school. You probably imagine that money is printed by the government, notes rolling off presses in some secure facility, crisp and official. And yes, some of it is. But here's the part that changes everything. Most money, roughly 90 to 97% of the money in circulation in modern economies, is not printed. It is created by banks as loans. Think about that. When a bank gives you a home loan of 50 lakh rupees, it doesn't actually go into a vault, pull out 50 lakh in cash and hand it to you. It types a number into a ledger. It creates that money digitally in that moment. And now that money exists. It didn't exist an hour ago. The economists call this fractional reserve banking. You can call it what it is, the world's most normalized magic trick. Now, here's where prices come in. When more money gets created, through loans, through government spending, through stimulus packages, there is more money in the system chasing roughly the same amount of goods and services. When more rupees are chasing the same loaf of bread, the price of that bread goes up. This is inflation in its most basic mechanical form. Not complicated, not mysterious. More money, same stuff. Prices rise. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, governments and central banks actually want a certain amount of inflation. They target it. They manage it. The Reserve Bank of India targets 4% inflation annually. The U.S. Federal Reserve targets 2%. The European Central Bank also targets 2%. This is official policy. Slow, steady, managed inflation is considered healthy. Why would anyone want prices to rise? Because the alternative, deflation, falling prices, is considered far more dangerous. If people expect prices to fall tomorrow, they stop spending today. If they stop spending, businesses stop earning. If businesses stop earning, workers get laid off. The economy contracts. You get a depression. So, the global financial system has been carefully engineered to have a permanent, mild leak, a slow bleed. Every year, deliberately, your money is worth a little less. They call it stability. And technically, they're not wrong. But here's what the official story leaves out. You've heard this word in the context of investments. How money grows when returns are reinvested. How a modest 10% annual return turns into something remarkable over 30 years. The same mathematics applies to inflation, except now it's working against you. At 4% annual inflation, which is again the official target in India, the purchasing power of your money halves every 18 years. Every 18 years, everything costs double what it did before. You are 30 years old today. By the time you are 48, everything you buy will cost roughly twice as much. By the time you are 66, roughly 4 times as much. Assuming your income keeps pace, which for most people, it does not. Here's another number. Between 2010 and 2023, the Indian Consumer Price Index, the official measure of inflation, rose by over 130%. The average private sector salary in India over the same period grew by substantially less for workers in the bottom 60% of earners. The top 10%? Their wealth grew faster than inflation, often significantly faster, because they owned assets, property, stocks, gold, that inflated in price along with everything else. In fact, faster. Here is the quiet mechanism hiding inside inflation that almost nobody talks about. When prices rise, the people who own things get richer, because the things they own are now worth more. The people who only have cash or a salary slowly get poorer, because their money buys less. Inflation is not neutral. It redistributes wealth, quietly, automatically, without anyone voting on it. Asset owners win. Everyone else treads water, or sinks. The official explanation you'll hear goes something like this. Inflation is caused by supply shocks, rising input costs, global commodity prices, geopolitical disruptions. And those things are real. The Ukraine war genuinely spiked wheat and sunflower oil prices globally. COVID genuinely disrupted supply chains. Oil price volatility genuinely ripples through every product that requires transportation. None of that is false, but here's what's incomplete about that story. Supply shocks cause temporary price spikes. They don't explain why prices almost never come back down once they rise. Think about your grocery bill. When was the last time a price decreased and stayed decreased? Fuel prices go up, tomatoes go up, the cost of your restaurant meal goes up, and then even when the supply disruption resolves, the prices quietly stay where they are. Sometimes they keep climbing. Economists have a term for this: price stickiness. Once prices go up, they don't come back down easily because wages are now higher to compensate. Input costs have been repriced across the supply chain, and sellers, quite rationally, don't volunteer to cut margins. So the supply shock narrative explains the spike. It does not explain the permanent new plateau. For that, you have to look at the money supply. Between 2020 and 2022 alone, the United States expanded its money supply by approximately 40%. India's M3 money supply grew by over 30% in the same period. Governments were spending extraordinary amounts to keep economies alive during the pandemic. That money went somewhere. It went into the price of everything. And unlike a supply shock, money creation doesn't reverse. The money is out there, in the system, permanently, diluting the value of every rupee and dollar already in existence. Here's the part that should sit uncomfortably with you. The same governments that create inflation also control the data used to measure it. The Consumer Price Index is a basket of goods decided by bureaucrats. When housing costs rose dramatically in India and globally over the past decade, the weight assigned to housing in inflation calculations changed. When food prices rose faster than headline inflation, food was occasionally separated from the core inflation figure that central banks focus on. This is not a conspiracy. It's just math choices, but math choices made by institutions with an interest in the number coming out a certain way. When a government says inflation was 5.5% last year, what they mean is that prices rose 5.5% on average across their selected basket. Your basket might have inflated at 9%.